The Range Rover in which the three died was bought 2 weeks ago by victim Craig Rolfe, who shared his pal's passion for motors. A neighbour in Range Essex said yesterday, quote, "He always seemed to have different cars on his drive, as if he was a car dealer. There were rumours he was involved with stealing cars and selling drugs. One time I saw police literally dismantling a car on his drive." Rolfe, 26, shared a 3-bed detached house with girlfriend of 7 years, Donna Jaggers, 26, and their 6-year-old daughter. They moved into the £80,000 home on the commuter estate of Chafford Hundred about 18 months ago. A woman living nearby said the couple seemed quite secretive. They always kept their curtains drawn and had little contact with their neighbours. She added, quote, "We sometimes saw them walking their dog, but on the whole they were rarely to be seen. Just a week ago there was a police pickup truck outside his house, and about 6 months ago the house seemed to be subject of police surveillance. We saw men sitting in cars outside the house on several occasions." Several neighbours remembered seeing the blue Range Rover in which the men were found dead. Yesterday, Rolfe's house, set on the end of a row of 4 homes, was deserted, and the curtains closed. The following police printout comes from the 11th of December 1995, where it states the following. Action number A644. I have seen someone today who has made remarks re the shooting. It's only hearsay. Person who gave me the information is blind. They got a taxi from Shenfield to Highwood Hospital, Brentwood, ordered taxi from Rank. The driver of the taxi said he knew people who had been shot, said it wasn't drugs related and that the young person shouldn't have been there. That was a mistake. I'm concerned RE come back on the taxi passenger as the pickup was from their address. Okay, now the first thing that catches my eye regarding this piece of information is the fact that supposedly Craig Rolfe wasn't supposed to be there that night, and that brings me back to the statement of Donna Jaggers, Craig Rolfe's girlfriend. It's in her statement that she states the following. I understood that Michael Steele had been asked by a London-based drugs firm to import 30 kilos of Charlie, and I believed that he was going to bring it in by plane from Holland. He had told Pat Tate that he was going to be given £50,000 as an upfront payment to take to Holland, and he was going to bring the Charlie back in the company with a member of the London firm. The idea was that Pat Tate and Tony Tucker would rob the firm of the Charlie when it arrived over here. Steele had stated that he wanted to share it between them and had told the firm that he was going to land near Clacton. Craig told me that Steele was planning to actually land in South Essex, but I never knew exactly where this was likely to be. Craig, Tony and Pat had previously obtained a machine gun from a man called Mad Mick Bowman, and the details of this are subject to a previous statement. Tate and Tucker were going to use the gun on the man from the firm in order to take the Charlie. I knew that they'd made sure the gun worked, but I did not know how far they were planning to go when they robbed the firm. Steele was going to land the plane, and Tate and Tucker were then going to take the complete load. It was going to be split eventually, 10 kilos each, and was going to be taken to John McCarthy. Craig told me that McCarthy was going to pay them nearly £1 million for the load, which was for Tate or Tucker to divide. Not long after Craig had told me about this, he told me that Tate and Tucker had decided that he was going to drive the load away once it had been taken and go to McCarthy's with it. They had told Craig that they intended to rip Steele off by cutting 3 kilos of the cocaine into 10 kilos of impure. This would have resulted in Tate and Tucker having 27 kilos between them. The remaining 3 kilos was going to be taken to Mick Bowman and he was going to cut it for them. I do not know what the arrangements were to get the 3 kilos to Bowman or to get the 10 kilos of impure back to Steele. By this time I was getting very worried by Craig's involvement and told him that I didn't want him to have any part in it. He told me that Steele didn't know that he was going to be driving, and he convinced me that he wasn't as heavily involved as the other two in what was going to happen. He also talked about the money which was likely to be coming their way and how that would enable us to go ahead with whatever plans we wanted. I realised that I wasn't going to be able to talk him out of it, and albeit I really didn't want him to go through with it, but I just gave up in the end. I believed that by this time he was in too deep. Okay, so when we take a look there at Donna Jaggers' statement, I guess you could tie this in with that information that was passed on to the police, the fact that Craig Rolfe wasn't supposed to be there, that was an accident. the people that were committing this crime did not know that Craig Rolfe was going to be there. What purpose did it really serve to kill Craig Rolfe, etc., etc.? But one of my biggest issues with this case, with the fact that Michael Steele and Jack Wombs are supposedly guilty of triple murder, is the way in which this crime was, I guess, planned. Let's for one moment put ourselves in the shoes of Michael Steele or even Jack Wombs potentially. Now, when you're arranging the meet for that evening, when you're trying to get Tony Tucker and Pat Tate, either one of those or both of them, to a certain place at a certain time, is there not a huge monumental risk there of those two people telling either a loved one, a girlfriend, bringing along a girlfriend even, with, to the trip? If it's just a case of scoping out some field, there's no sort of violence going to be taking place, there's no deals going down, essentially. Is that not a big risk to take when considering committing triple murder? And for me, the biggest risk of all would be, as I just said there, that one of these individuals would divulge this information to someone close to them. Now, how many deals did Donna Jaggers go with Craig Rolfe? Quite a few. She even went to get the machine gun from Mad Mick Bowman at the services. She was present when Rolfe did many deals or collected much of the product that Steele had on him at the time. Her statement is littered with instances of being with Craig Rolfe and also in the company of Michael Steele. So what happens at that point when you realise that Craig Rolfe is driving the Range Rover that evening? Would it not click in your head that it's going to be pretty obvious that he said exactly where he's going, who he's going to meet that night? And this is what people talk about the lack of forensic evidence, the lack of DNA evidence, the phone evidence. The people talk about all the evidence that's actually in front of our own eyes. But what I like to do, and I think one of the biggest sticking points, is the fact that one of these individuals could have easily have mentioned who they were going to meet. And according to Donna Jaggers' statement, that is exactly what happened. She mentions there that they were going to meet Mick the pilot, Michael Steele, she picked him out of an identity parade. Of course she did, because she was with Craig Rolfe on the numerous occasions that he met up with Steele. And I think for me, this is, as I say, one of the more stranger issues. Now, does that go to discredit any involvement whatsoever concerning Wombs and Steele? Of course it doesn't. I mean, they could have got Tucker, Tate and Rolfe to a certain location for somebody else. Maybe they were being threatened. Maybe there's a mystery third party somewhere down the line here. But in terms of the bare basics, the actual lure to the lane itself, the 2 p.m. phone call that goes to Tony Tucker to supposedly arrange the meeting for that night, is there not a huge risk here of someone being in the Range Rover that shouldn't be? Not only that, but we're told that Steele was in the Range Rover with Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. But what about Jack Wombs? He's down the lane. He's actually waiting down Workhouse Lane. What would happen if during that drive they picked up somebody, they picked up a girlfriend, there was a change of plan at the last minute, someone needed picking up because they're going to this restaurant booking for 8 p.m. To me, it just doesn't make any sense in terms of how you would actually plan out this triple murder. The location is perfect. The timing is perfect. Everything seems to be matching up perfectly in terms of the murder itself and how it was committed. Clean, efficient, fast, great location. Combine the time with when there's normally a shoot going on there. All of that makes perfect sense. Yet we're led to believe that they simply called up Tony Tucker, said, we're meeting down there, or pick me up, whatever it is. We're going to look at a field. Surely the first thing that they're going to do, potentially, is tell someone close to them exactly where they're going. What's Rolfe's girlfriend going to say? Oh, where are you going, Craig? Oh, going to meet Mick. Going to meet Mick Steele. Mick Steele, that guy, that we've seen on many occasions. I'm going to meet him. And when I don't return, just remember, I'm going to meet Mick Steele. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. Either that is incredibly poor planning and a massive oversight in terms of Steele and Wombs during the actual planning process, or that simply can't be true. And some people have even factored in that it would take Craig Rolfe, Tony Tucker and Pat Tate to be there. It needed all 3 individuals to be there in case there was any comeback if you, say, killed 1 out of the 3 of them. Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Do you believe that Craig Rolfe was actually supposed to be there that night? Was this a last minute changing of plan and Craig wanted to be there? Did the gunman know all along that there was going to be three individuals, Rolfe, Tucker and Tate, and all three of them needed to be disposed of? With hindsight, Craig Rolfe's descent into a life of crime seems almost inevitable. After all, his first view of the world was the grey walls of Holloway Prison. His mother Lorraine was serving 18 months after lying to police in a bid to protect her teenage lover. That lover had ruthlessly beaten her husband, Rolfe's dad, with a skittle until his skull was crushed like an eggshell. Tony Tucker was later to tell his gang members the sad story of Rolfe's birth, which had left him with a chip on his shoulder. Lorraine, then of Linford Drive, Basildon, had been seeing 19-year-old John Kennedy while her husband Brian worked as a market trader. On Christmas Eve 1968, the youngster crept into their home as the 28-year-old Brian lay asleep next to Lorraine. He killed him. When she was woken by the noise, Kennedy allegedly told her, "I have done it to prove how much I love you." Kennedy of Butneys, Basildon, and 23-year-old Lorraine were arrested and both charged with murder. Lorraine, who was already a mother of three and expecting Rolfe, told police, "I never touched him, honest, on my baby's life." She was cleared of the murder charge, but sobbed as the judge sentenced Kennedy to life. Then, as he gave her 18 months for making false statements, Mr. Justice Bridge told her, quote, "I accept as the basis of my sentence that you were confronted with a dilemma when you realised your lover had murdered your husband. But I cannot escape from the conclusion that it was an event which caused satisfaction rather than distress, and you were prepared to do what lay in your power to see your lover escape punishment." Lorraine cried, "I'd done nothing." As she was led from the Sussex Assizes court supported by prison officers, she later said, quote, "I was 3 months pregnant with Craig when his dad was murdered. My family has been dogged by bad luck." Rolfe, a cocaine addict, became a gopher for Tucker when he joined his gang in the early 90s. He was probably his most trusted friend, and associates say he was quite possessive of Tucker. He was certainly implicated in some of the gang leaders' most dubious scams. In September 1995, they were approached by a part-time drug dealer who had £18,000 of cannabis to sell. Tucker and Rolfe took the man to Birmingham, where Tucker claimed to have a contact. While the dealer and Rolfe waited, Tucker disappeared with the drugs. He returned, saying police had busted them before he got the money. The dealer either had to accept the excuse or take them on. There is no police record of a bust in the city at that time. Rolfe lived with his long-term girlfriend in the commuter belt of Chafford 100. He also owned a property in Mill Green, Basildon. Their daughter was only 7 at the time of the killings. The following police document comes from the 10th of December 1995. Action number A570. Informant rang me saying Craig Rolfe owes somebody £60,000. Also, Craig Rolfe is involved with someone called Robert Emmons from Slade Green. Metpol/Kent informant thinks that Emmons is next on list. Previous target of Essex Police Drug Squad car, index ROB 130. Craig Rolfe was a bouncer of Emmons Club before. I will come back with any further info after speaking with my informant again. Okay, now what I find quite interesting about these police printouts, albeit I haven't covered that many of them on the channel, it's certainly something I'll be doing in the future. But what I find interesting about the information which comes in is that this is literally 3 days after the deaths of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. We have to remember here that this is before the books, the TV programmes, the documentaries, the YouTube channels, before any real information was known about these 3 individuals or who may be responsible for the murders. Now, when I say 3 days since the death, what I mean by that is 3 days since the discovery of the bodies of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. 3 days before this became public knowledge as to who had been murdered in the Range Rover. Yet we have this registered police informant coming forward with some information very early on in the piece here, saying that Craig Rolfe owes somebody £60,000. The exact wording of that is the informant rang me saying Craig Rolfe owes somebody £60,000. Now, the first thing that flashed through my mind once I read that was, could this be tied in some way with the death of Kevin Whitaker? Now, interestingly, in the book Blogs 19, written by Tony Thompson, it states the following regarding the death of Kevin Whitaker. Having narrowly escaped a good hiding over the missing cannabis fiasco, Whitaker had been very wary of dealing with Rolfe & Co again. But when, in November 1994, they offered him the chance of coming in on another deal, it was too good an opportunity to miss. A buyer had come to Rolfe asking for 25 kilos of cannabis worth around £60,000. Rolfe didn't have access to that much straight away, but didn't want to lose the deal, so he stalled while calling round everyone he knew in order to put their stashes together to make up the full amount. Whitaker knew where he could get his hands on a large amount of cannabis on short-term credit and at a discount for buying in bulk, and realised that this was his chance to make some proper money for once. Based on his contribution, he should have made at least £5,000. But once the deal was in place, he was told he was only going to be paid £2,000, barely enough to cover the cost of the drugs themselves and leaving him with no profit at all. It was then that Whitaker made the biggest mistake of his life. He complained. Rolfe promised to sort it out, and after discussing the situation with Tucker, called Whitaker on the Thursday to invite him over to his house on the pretext of wanting to arrange another deal to boost Whitaker's profits. At first, it all seemed plausible enough. Whitaker arrived to find Rolfe, Tucker and Rolfe's girlfriend in the front room drinking. He was offered a beer and sat down to join in the conversation. But as he drank, he began to feel a little woozy, and then he found he could no longer stand properly or see clearly. By the time he realised his drink had been spiked, it was too late. Okay, now what I find quite important there in those paragraphs is the mentioning of that same monetary amount, the £60,000. Now, some people say that Whitaker was simply disposed of because he'd messed up on a previous deal, but other people tend to believe that there was a large amount of money involved here somewhere down the line, which Tucker and Rolfe made off with. So is this what this informant is discussing here with his police handler? The informant rang me saying Craig Rolfe owes somebody £60,000. Now, when I read this piece of information, when I read this little snippet of information here, I started to think about a motive for the murders, or at least how Tucker, Tate and Rolfe could have ended up down the lane that evening. Could there actually be an element of truth to what we've been told all along, that they were down there potentially for a dry run, but they were down there originally, or were going to be down there originally, to rip off some other firm, steal some product? Did they know some kind of deal was going down that they would plan to intercept in the coming days? Is that what the people who killed them used to lure them down the lane on the evening of December the 6th, knowing that they would fully go for the prize because they'd done it before with Kevin Whitaker? If there's some truth here in terms of money being taken from Whitaker or the gang or associates that he was involved with, is that how Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were lured down the lane, knowing very well that they'd go for the prize as they did before? And then I started to consider the potential involvement of Nichols, Wombs and Steele. How do we account for them being in the area or surrounding area on the evening of December the 6th? And then we go back to the statement of Darren Nichols again. I think a lot of people will agree with me that there is an element of truth in what he says, but he sort of twists it around. And I think that the barrister for Steele and Wombs pointed this out in court, that he almost switches roles with other people during the time he gives his statements. He talks about Steele being this person and Wombs being that person, and he sort of switches the roles between the two. Was Nichols more involved? I guess we will never know. But what I'm trying to get at here is that Nichols has come forward, I guess, or put forward the idea that Steele went to Tate. Steele went to Tate during that trip to Amsterdam and said, look, a London gang is paying me X amount of money to fly this Charlie in. Can you be there to intercept the parcel and rob them? We'll split the profits, we'll split the product, we'll cut the product, whatever, and we'll make good our escape. But could it actually be, in fact, that it wasn't Steele who approached Tate with this idea? It was actually the other way round. that Tate approached Steele. Tate, Rolfe and Tucker had this idea, or they knew that a deal was going down during December the 6th or after that time. Even in Donna Jagger's statement, they were going to meet Mick. They were going to meet Mick for a deal. Even Darren Nichols talks about Steele going to meet Pat that night for a deal, some kind of drug deal. Was that Steele's involvement to take the product away to stash for a later date? Was it Tate who approached Steele and not the other way round, as we've been led to believe by Darren Nichols? Is this a simple switching of positions again, a switching of the truth? Now, Pat Tate came out of prison in October 1995. He was incarcerated during the time that Whitaker was killed. But when he actually came out of prison, was this idea, this notion, put forward by Tucker and Rolfe? They'd already done this before. Was this something that Tate was now involved in? This was the next step up the ladder for Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. This was easy money. We know that they'd ripped people off before. The traveller's checks, ripping off drug dealers for drugs, stealing drugs, not paying for them. Was this the plan that ultimately led to their demise? Now, this may be related or unrelated. As I say, a lot of this is playing devil's advocate. But we do have quite an intriguing statement from Craig Rolfe's neighbour, who mentions odd people coming and going even after the death of Craig Rolfe. Just going to read a few paragraphs from her statement, which was given on the 16th of December 1995 by a lady called Elizabeth LePage. It's during her police statement that she mentions the following. On Tuesday the 5th of December, I left my home at around 11:30 a.m. to go to the clinic. On this occasion, I was getting into my car, a red Ford Sierra, when I had to ask Craig to move the Range Rover to allow me out. There were two other people with Craig at this time. One was Tony Tucker, the second person was a white male, but I took no further notice of this person. From pictures I've seen in the papers, this person could have been Pat Tate, but I cannot be sure. On Tuesday evening, it was around 7 p.m, although again I cannot be accurate with the time. I remember going out to our car to get my purse when I saw a male person calling at Craig and Donna's house. There was obviously no one in. This person was a white male, average build, mid-30s. I can remember he had a red top. He was casual in dress but was carrying a briefcase. I thought by his dress that it was unusual to be carrying a briefcase of this description. I think it was a black briefcase. I took no further notice of this person. I did not see any vehicle on the driveway at this time. On Wednesday, the 6th of December, I saw Craig around midday. I was leaving home to visit my mother's house. I saw Craig drive off in his Range Rover. At this time, he was alone. I cannot remember if Craig walked to his car or if he was just driving off. I don't recall anything about Thursday, although I visited my mother's in the afternoon. On Friday, the 8th of December, I had callers from the press and television, and I discovered that Craig had been murdered. On Sunday the 10th of December, at around 1 p.m, we had a caller who introduced himself as Bernard Lee. He gave me a calling card which recorded a company called BP Foods of Grays. This person showed concern for Donna. He asked about her location and welfare, before handing us his card and driving off in a green Jaguar XJ6 motor car. I will describe Mr. Lee as follows. White male, aged 50 years, unshaven. He was short in build and had a lot of teeth missing. He had scruffy grey hair. This person was wearing a brown leather jacket, dark trousers and black slip-on shoes. The calling card was later handed to a couple with a white BMW who had been in Donna and Craig's house. On Wednesday the 13th of December, I had an appointment to see a friend at 1:30 p.m. Just before this, about midday, I had just returned from shopping and I was unloading my car when a male approached me on my driveway. He asked me if I was alright and said he was looking for Donna. This person didn't seem particularly friendly. He was short, sharp and to the point. He said, "Where is she?" I replied with the words to the effect, "I haven't got a clue." He replied, "When you see her, tell her Davey's looking for her." I carried on unloading my shopping and I didn't take any more notice. I have in mind it was a white car. I cannot say if the car was parked in the driveway or on the path outside, or even if this person was connected to a white car. I would describe Dave as follows. White male, mid-30s, medium build. He had a rounded face with dark hair. The hairstyle was short, collar length at the back with a straight style around the sides and onto the forehead. He was clean shaven and did not wear glasses. This person had a local accent, but I saw no obvious or distinguishing features. To be honest, I didn't pay that much attention to him. I can remember Dave was wearing jeans, but I cannot recall any other clothing. On Thursday, the 14th of December, I became aware of somebody in Craig and Donna's house. I knocked, but no one answered. I left a note, and about half an hour later, Donna called round to our home where we had a conversation about her and Georgia's welfare. After a few minutes, Donna left. Since Thursday, there have been other callers to number 8 Calshot Avenue, but no persons have called to our home address. Now, although there isn't one particular eyewitness sighting there that is massively alarming, I guess, for me, what is most intriguing is who was this caller the day before they were murdered? The person who was casually dressed but carrying a briefcase. That does seem a little bit strange. Obviously, put your own thoughts and theories in the comment section below, but certainly there was a lot of bizarre or odd comings and goings in the days leading up to and the days after the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. I think to summarise this particular video, when you take a look at these police printouts, which there are quite a few throughout this case, which I haven't actually covered, as I say, up until this point, what I find most intriguing about these little snippets of information is the fact that this was really at a time before, as I stated at the start of this video, before the books, before the films, before the website with the statements was around. It was at a time when only people who were close to them or knew of them would have had information regarding these murders. So I do find this information from this police informant quite interesting. Did Craig Rolfe and Tony Tucker owe somebody £60,000? Was this to do with the death of Kevin Whitaker? And most importantly, the people who he was associated with. Could this go to explain Nichols, Steele and Wome's involvement to some degree? Were they part of the plan to stitch up this other firm? Is that how this other firm ultimately led Tucker, Tate and Rolfe to their murder? Was this set up by the people who killed Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, knowing full well that they had done something very similar before in the killing or the murder of Kevin Whitaker and the stealing of this cash? Was the carrot dangled under the nose, so to speak, of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe? The following police statement is from Craig Anthony Rolfe, dated the 1st of December 1994. About 5 years ago, whilst at my friend's, Robert Emmons' flat, I met a man by the name of Kevin Whitaker. Over the years, I've got to know Kevin fairly well. Having said that, we were not particularly close, although I have done him a few favours in the past. We've only gone out socially together on one occasion, and on average I would see him 2 to 3 times a month. The last time I saw Kevin was on Tuesday the 15th of the 11th 94 around mid-afternoon, when I saw him standing in a telephone kiosk in Rectory Road, Pitsea, making a telephone call. I stopped the car I was driving, a blue Vauxhall Corsa, and had a conversation for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. I then drove off and left him to walk to Simon Smith's house. The last time I spoke to Kevin was sometime between 1500 and 1600 hours on Thursday the 17th of the 11th 94, when I phoned him from my home address to his father's address. This conversation lasted approximately 5 minutes, and all I can recall of the conversation was that he had mentioned that he had been to see his little boy in the morning. During all these conversations, at no time did Kevin mention that he was worried about anything or that he had any problems, other than the fact that he was a bit down having split up with his girlfriend. After I'd finished the conversation, I stayed at home watching the television whilst my girlfriend Donna Jaggers went to Lakeside Shopping Centre. Donna returned home approximately 6 p.m. the same day, and we had our evening meal together. Having finished our meal, Donna and myself then left our home address and drove to Basildon in the blue Vauxhall Corsa, arriving there around 7 p.m. that evening at our friend's house at 1 Ames Green, Basildon. This is the home address of Steve Thomas and his girlfriend Michelle. Unfortunately, by the time we had arrived, Michelle had gone out to an aerobic class, so we only stayed for a short while, arriving home together at approximately 9 to 9:30 that evening. We watched television for a short while and then went to bed for the night. I didn't leave my house till around midday on Friday the 18th of the 11th 94, when I left my house to drive to Basildon to see friends. At this time I left Grays Police Station and drove into Brook Road. As I did so, I saw a blue Range Rover, index number Foxtrot 424, November Papa Echo, which was travelling in front of my vehicle. I was aware that Craig Rolfe was the user of this vehicle. The vehicle parked in Brook Road, adjacent to the front entrance to the police station, and I parked my vehicle directly behind it. I got out of my vehicle, and as I did so, the driver and sole occupant of the Range Rover also got out. I recognised the driver to be a person whom I know to be Craig Rolfe. I called out to Rolfe and had a conversation with him regarding a future appointment to obtain a statement from his common law wife, Miss Jaggers. The conversation lasted for a few seconds, and as I recollect, Rolfe was wearing a black puffer jacket and tracksuit bottoms. I then returned to my vehicle. I did not see where Rolfe went to as he walked away from his vehicle. I then left the scene. I can be certain that the male I spoke with was Craig Rolfe.